Hello, everyone. This is a small introduction to well stimulation. Unfortunately, the well stimulation is a very wide topic and it's pretty much advanced. So if you didn't take drilling technology or reservoir engineering or something like that, go and read a little bit about it. Drilling technology and reservoir engineering, maybe rock and fluid mechanics, rock and fluid properties, I mean, and fluid mechanics, and then you can go through well stimulation because it's a little bit advanced, but we are only giving you a small introduction to it. So yeah, so what are we going to talk today in our presentation? First, we are going to know exactly what does it mean when we say well stimulation. First, we will go through the word stimulation, what does it mean, and so on. And then how can we link it to the oil industry when we say that we want to stimulate the well. Second of all, we will see what's the difference between the normal drive mechanisms, what is the difference between the primary, secondary, tertiary, and the well stimulation, because they both have the same objective. They want to take the oil from the reservoir to the surface through the well, right? But there are some differences between them. And then we'll go to some well stimulation techniques. They are famous. The first one is acidizing. The second one is hydraulic fracturing. And then after each one of them, we will see what are the factors that affect each stimulation technique. So let's just jump into it. So first, when we talk about stimulation, what does stimulation mean? Stimulation means encouraging or improving. And I have an example here. As you see like a man's arm that has two pads on it, and they are linked to a wire. Actually, this is called muscle stimulator. So what does actually those pads are? They will actually send an electrical current, and it will run to the muscle. So the muscle, when it's received the electrical current, it will be stimulated to contract. So the muscle will contract based on the electrical current that was sent. So what can we come up with this example? We can say that the muscle was stimulated by the electrical current. So stimulation, in other words, we can say it is a reaction based on an action, okay? So the action here is sending an electrical current. The reaction we get is the muscle contracting, right? So that's pretty much it with the stimulation and what does it mean and so on. So how can we apply it in the oil industry? So when we are drilling for the reservoir, okay, we want to reach to the target zone, and the target zone, the oil zone, it's in the subsurface, right? So we need to drill in order to gain the hydrocarbons. So what is going on when we are drilling? Because we are drilling in an overbalanced technique, okay, why is that? Because there are some fluid that comes out from the formation with a certain pressure, but we want to drill, so we use drilling fluid for that. That's why I told you that you need to have a little bit of knowledge of drilling technology. So because we are dealing with an off-balance system, overbalanced system, so the drilling mud is way higher in pressure than the formation pressure. The formation, the mud, actually the mud filtrate will go inside the formation, as you know. And that can really damage the pay zone. When we reach the pay zone, we want to drill through the pay zone, unless if you are going for an open hole completion, and the completion part is a little bit tedious, but like normally and conventionally, you would drill through the pay zone. So when you do that, because the pay zone is permeable, what will happen is mud filtrate will go inside the pay zone, and it will damage the area around the well. So what does the area around the well called? It's called the well bore, okay? The well that connects the wall that connects the well to the reservoir. So it will be damaged, and because it is damaged, permeability will be reduced, and lots of factors we have to consider it and so on. So what do we need to stimulate? We want to stimulate that area, the area around the well, and it is called the well bore, okay? So when we stimulate that, we'll increase the permeability, we will enhance the oil production, and that's exactly what we want. Now, is that important? Of course it is important. It is important because our main objective, are we drilling? Why are we doing all of that thing? It's not for nothing. It's for the oil itself. You know, it has a commercial value and so on. So we want that. And in order to obtain it in a huge quantity, in order to sell it and so on, and get benefit from it, we want to collect as much as hydrocarbons as possible, in the same time in the least in the feasible way, you know, in the least cost method. So that's what we are going for. So exactly what I said, because we drill and because the mud filtrate will go inside the formation, a layer will be created. The mud filtrate will go inside, and the solid content of the mud will be on the wall of the well, and this is the well bore, and it is the mud cake. So yeah, if you know what's a mud cake, that's good. If you don't know what's a mud cake is the solid content that participates along the well bore, because the water content of the mud will go inside the formation. So yeah. Now let's talk about what's the difference between well stimulation and the other oil recovery methods. Now, well stimulation is not a recovery method by itself. Why? Because its main objective, yes, they are similar by the main objective that we want to enhance the way of getting oil, okay? But it's not technically the same. So when we are talking about the oil recovery methods, there are three methods, okay? Primary, secondary, and tertiary, okay? So primary and secondary, they are not really related or close to well stimulation, because primary is only depending on the natural energy, okay? And the natural energy can be from the gas cap, from the aquifer, and it can be from the gas that is soluble in oil, and so on. Natural drive mechanism, they are called. In the secondary, we are only swiping the oil from the pay zone, or we are injecting gas or water in order to maintain the pressure. So it's not really close to well stimulation. What did we say the meaning of stimulation? It's a reaction that we are waiting for a reaction for, right? Encouragement and so on. And that's not really close. But well stimulation, it's really close to the tertiary oil recovery method, or enhanced oil recovery. Why? Because they actually affect the way of how oil is transferring from the reservoir to the well. So the main difference here between EOR, enhanced oil recovery, and well stimulation is that well stimulation does not affect the physical or the chemical behavior of the oil. Enhanced oil recovery, they do. They affect it. How? For example, in enhanced oil recovery, what do we have? We have surfactants, for example, that can alternate with some additive that can alternate the wettability inside the rock and so on. We have the thermal treatment, like injecting steam and so on. So we are changing the physical or the chemical behavior of the oil. But when we are talking about the stimulation, well stimulation, we're only increasing the permeability, reducing the damage and so on. We are not changing the characteristics of the oil. So that's pretty much it. Now, when we talk about well stimulation, we have to introduce a very, very, very important thing, and it's called the skin factor. Now, what is skin? Skin is a really good thing sometimes. It's sometimes a bad thing. And we can start with this equation. So what's this equation? This is Darcy's law, okay? This is Darcy's equation. And this is one of the most basic form of equations that you will see when you are studying petroleum engineering. So it's a relationship between pressure in a porous media and its relation to the Q, which is the injection rate and so on, and the radius, because this is for radial flow, as you know. So what is skin? Skin can be a restriction, like the mud cake that we discussed, the damage that we saw earlier. It can be a restriction, or it can be something good for us. It can be a new pathways for the hydrocarbon to go through. So what is skin? In simple terms, we can modify Darcy's equation to say that the skin is an additional or less difference in pressure, okay? An additional or a subtraction difference in pressure in the original equation of Darcy's law. So when we add the difference in pressure, the additional difference in pressure, what do we have? We have the final equation that you see there, that plus S. The plus S is the plus the skin factor. Now, what did we say about skin? Skin is a good dude sometimes, but sometimes he's a bad dude. So skin means obstacle, okay? So we need plus obstacle or we need minus obstacle. Of course, we need minus obstacle. So for example, reservoir, we drilled through it and so on. And before we drill in it, so it hasn't been touched. So S is 0, okay? There is no skin factor exist in the beginning, okay? But once we drill, because the drilling process actually damaged the payzone, what will happen? We will have a skin factor, which is the S that you see in the last equation of the modification of Darcy's law. So if we have a positive difference in pressure, a positive S in other words, that means we have an additional obstacle, such as the red thing that you see in the presentation, which is the, let me put a laser pointer here, which is the mud cake. Let's see, this red thing is the mud cake, okay? This is another obstacle, an additional obstacle, it wasn't here before. So it will add to the skin factor. If we add it to the skin factor, that means that we are adding in the difference in pressure, so there is a restriction of flow. In other words, if we have a negative obstacle, for example, we drilled, okay, and because we use, for example, water-based mud, the water reacted with some of the formation minerals or rocks or something like that and created new pathways. So if that happened, that means that we have a negative S, negative skin. That means we have a less restriction of pressure. We have less restriction, less obstacles. So positive skin, bad thing. Negative skin is a really good fellow that will help you in the oil recovery later. So after we introduce skin, let's really jump into what well stimulation is. So we have some techniques in well stimulation, and we will start them with acidizing. So in acidizing, what does it mean? It's exactly how it sounds. We will inject acid in order to dissolve some parts of the formation rock. And when we say the formation rock, we don't want to dissolve any rock. We want to dissolve the formation which contain hydrocarbons, so the reservoir, okay? But only the area around the well. Why? Because it is damaged, okay? And even if it wasn't damaged, we want to enhance it. So in order to enhance it, okay, we need to understand the reservoir. We need to prepare for it. So we cannot only drill and then say, it's not producing very well, we should go to acidizing. No, we have to plan it from the beginning. And from the beginning, before we even drill the first hole, that we say, okay, we know from the appraiser wells and so on that this reservoir is tight. Therefore, we will bring the right equipment, the right casing grade and so on. If you don't know its casing, you have to go back to drilling technology in order to understand what I'm going to say right now. So you have to have the proper casing. Why? Because acid will react to metal, okay? And you want a casing with anti-corrosion, for example, layer or coating on it. So you need the proper tools to do that, and you need to prepare for it. So acidizing, it consists of 3 flushes: the pre-flush, the main flush, and the overflush, and exactly like it sounds like. So pre-flush, it's before we flush the right acid, the acid that we want to flush it in order to do its job. So the pre-flush, it is mostly in general terms, I'm saying that, conventionally, they inject HCl, which is an acid, from a concentration between 5 to 15%, with solvents. Solvents are normally hydrocarbons, okay, such as gasoline, kerosene, or something like that. So they will mix it with that and then they will inject it. Why do they inject the pre-flush? Because they want to clear the wellbore. They want to clear the face or the wall of the well. Why is that? Because it may have water, it may have oil, residual water from the drilling process or oil coming from the formation. And that can really damage the acidizing process. It will not be efficient as it was planned. So that's why they do the pre-flush, okay? Then we go through the main flush. And as you can see, there is a difference between the carbonate main flush and the sandstone main flush. And you will ask, why is that? And I will answer because they are different. Their chemical components is way different. Carbonate, it has calcium in it. Actually, the chemical compounds, the chemical formula, let's say, of carbonate reservoirs is CaCO3. Okay, this is the chemical expression of carbonate. Now, carbonate, it does react very well with HCl. Okay, and it doesn't leave that much of damage. But sandstone, on the other hand, when you only acidize it with HCl, no, it has further problems. If you only inject HCl to it, it may not react with all of the components of sandstone, because sandstone, we know that it can contain quartz, which is silicon, Si, which it can contain feldspars, it can contain a lots of things. So HCl is not enough for it. So it is injected with another acid. HCl is injected with another acid, which is HF, which is hydrofluoric acid. Okay. So because they are different in their components, the main flush is different. Okay. So that's to put it in simple terms. And then the overflush. What is the benefit of overflush? The benefit of overflush to stop the acid process, because if it didn't stop, if it continued, it can precipitate more salts, more solids, more than we calculated from the beginning. It can do additional problems and so on. So we want to stop it. So what can we do for that? We want to stop it. So sometimes we inject surfactants. Why do we inject surfactants? To assure that the wettability is not changed because of the acid process. What's the importance of wettability and so on? Because if the rock was oil wet, that is really bad for us. The oil will stick to the rock. We want the rock to be water wet, so water will stick to the rock, and oil will be in the middle. You know, it is not stuck to the rock. It is between the water. Okay, so after the water is stick to the rock, it will allow for the oil to flow, and that's exactly what we want. And there are lots of things to inject as well, such as nitrogen, NH4Cl, and so on. And as we said before, it is for stopping the acidizing process and assure that we are not damaging the reservoir or damaging the wellbore around the well using the acid, while using acidizing well stimulation. The other method that we have is hydraulic fracturing. But before we go to that, we said that we will talk about the factors that will affect each technique. So the factors that can affect the acidizing is poor candidate selection. So for example, we selected the super low concentration, like 1 or 2 or 3% concentration HCl. That's really bad. Okay, that will not reach that much far. Okay, lack of knowledge, lack of mineralogical information. We have to know what is the lithology. Okay, for example, is it sandstone or carbonate? Okay, we say sandstone. What is the concentration? What is the amount of feldspar in that sandstone comparing to quartz or something like that? So we need to know that thing as well. So wrong acid design, acid type, and as I said before, the poor candidate selection, or the acid selection, it has to be nearly perfect and so on. And yeah, and there are lots of things that affect the acidizing process, but I want to emphasize on a specific point, which is the pump rate. And that's exactly what you see in this picture right here. So if the pump rate was really low, most of the acid will react to the face of the wall, and this is not preferable. Why? Because yes, it will create big and huge hole, but we don't need that. We only need small and far hole in order for the hydrocarbons to seep from the reservoir to the well and then reach to the surface, okay? So here we are increasing the pump rate, okay? So when we increase the pump rate, we are seeing that it is reaching farther and farther. So what is the optimum rate that we want? The optimum rate is here in the middle, okay? So it is small, it is reaching far, it is not branching very much, and that's exactly what we want. But if we kept raising the pump rate more and more and more, this is not preferable. Why? Because it will create more and more branches, and this is not preferable at all. As we said, we want tight, not lots of branches, and very far. Why is branching very bad? It's creating new paths. That's exactly true. We are creating new paths, but the bad thing in branching is all of the acid is wasted in small amounts of length. You are not going that much deep. And if you went that deep, you will use a lot of acid, and this is not very commercial, okay? So you want to use less amount of acid, going that much far in a short amount of branches, okay? You don't want that much of branches and so on. So yeah, now let's go to hydraulic fracturing. When we talk about hydraulic fracturing, it is like very, very, very weird concept, but it is actually used in oil industry. We will frack the rock with fluids, okay? It is exactly like that. So hydraulic fracturing is we are reaching the fracture pressure of the rock. How can we do that? We will use fluids, but not any type of fluid, okay? We will use liquids. Why do we use liquids, not gases? Because liquids are not that much compressible comparing to gases. It's actually, when we compare it to gases, it's not compressible at all, okay? You can neglect its compressibility. So we will use fluids, okay? And what type of fluid? We use liquid. Why? Because it's not compressible. As simple as that. So normally when you are drilling, okay, you don't want to exceed the fracture pressure. Why? Because that will make you lose your drilling fluid and so on, which can cause a kick, and furthermore, it can cause a blowout, and I'm not exaggerating. Losing lots of fluids of your drilling fluid, it can really cause a blowout, and this is a really bad thing. So, but this time, hydraulic fracturing is really good, okay, because it's a stimulation method. So as I said in the acidizing process, you need to plan for this before you even drill the well. For example, after you finish your appraisal evaluation, appraisal wells, and you evaluate the reservoir and said, okay, it is tight, so we need further stimulation. So you will go and select the proper tools for that. One of the most important tools, as I said, not tools, like equipments that you need to use, and you need to counter, and you need to really prepare it, is the casing, okay? You don't need a thin wall casing. You need a thick wall casing in order to absorb all of this pressure and only frack the rock, not frack the casing with it, okay? Or burst the casing from inside. So this is hydraulic fracturing. So how does it really work? After you drill, after you do the casing, cementing, everything, okay, you will go and bring your apparatus in the surface. Now, your apparatus in the surface contain the track-mounted pumps. So we have pumps that are mounted in the trucks. Blenders. Why do we need blenders? I will tell you later. Fluid tanks that you will use to store the fluid, fracturing fluid. And then propane tank. What is propane tank? It's not propane. It's not a hydrocarbon. It's another thing that I'll explain after 1 minute from now, okay? So yeah, be patient. So what is happening exactly? So we have here the trucks, the propane tank, the fluid, the fracturing fluid tank, and so on. So what will happen? First, we will inject the fracturing fluid without the propane, okay? Only the fracturing fluid. We will inject it even more, and more and more until there is no space for the fluid to go unless if it builds pressure. So it will build pressure, because there is no place for the fluid to go. And then it will reach to us a place where the weakest point inside the system, it will burst, it will crack. And this is one of the challenges in the whole system, like in the beginning of the pumps, in the well, in the casing, like everywhere inside the system, the weakest point must be the rock, because we want to frack the rock. We don't want to frack anything else. So the weakest part is the rock. Therefore, it will actually collapse. Okay, it will frack. After it fracks, what will happen? We will bring the propant. We will mix it in the blender. Okay, we will mix it with the fracking fluid, and then we'll inject it. What is propant? Propant is small little balls. Okay, it's like the marble balls that we used to play with when we were kids. Okay, it's very, very, very small balls. Okay, and sometimes they are made of glass. Other times they are made of other materials, and so on. So those are propant. And what is the function of propant? Why do we need small balls to be mixed with the fracturing fluid, and we inject the small balls into the reservoir? Because we fracked the rock. So what do you expect to happen? It may collapse. Okay, we fracked the rock. Okay, so the fractures may collapse because they are not stable. Okay, so what we are going to do is, with this propant, we will keep the fractures open. Okay, when we keep the fractures open, we are now creating a new path for the oil to seep through and then go to the well bore and then go to the well, and then we can get it and produce it. So that's, in a simple term, the hydraulic fracturing. It sounds crazy, but it's actually applicable, and they do it. Okay, so what are the factors that affect the hydraulic fracturing? Well, first is the water blocking, because actually hydraulic fracturing, it is used for tight reservoirs. Tight reservoirs are, most of the time, not all the time, most of the time they are gas reservoirs. Okay, so what will happen is water is very dense compared to gas. Okay, so what will happen is, not this first picture, the second picture is the water blocking. So what will happen is small amount of gases will be trapped around the rock and also surrounded with water. So the water will go inside the pores. Okay, and between the pores, between the rock and the water, there are some gas that is trapped. Okay, natural gas that is trapped. So water blocking is a bad thing, and it can happen, and it has to be considered before even going to hydraulic fracturing. Okay, and this can happen usually in gas reservoirs. The second point, or the second thing that can affect the hydraulic fracturing, is the propant placement. If the propant is big, okay, and it wasn't really taken in consideration before the fracturing process and so on, it can really block the pores, or it can really block the fractures that was created in the hydraulic fracturing. Okay, so yeah, and also water availability and cost. We are using a tremendous amount of water to frack the rock. I mean, it's by tons. Okay, it's a lot of water you are using to frack the rock or the formation. So is the water available? And if it is available, is it costly? Is it feasible? So yeah, you have to consider that before you go to hydraulic fracturing. So that's pretty much it. It is a small introduction. I didn't went to a lot of calculations, because there are calculations in the acidizing, there are calculations in the hydraulic fracturing, and yeah, there are lots of calculations, and I didn't want to make this complicated and boring. So that's pretty much it. And if you have any questions, please, we will send to you a Google form, so you can ask us through the Google form. The questions will be referred to myself, and then I will answer them, and you can get your answer, okay? And I want to thank SkolarGate for giving me the opportunity and this platform to give you this knowledge. They are very cool. They are good working men and women. Their goal is to educate people around the globe in the oil industry, so oil and gas industry. So this is very good and perfect for students and even graduators. Okay, you are graduated, but you want to increase your knowledge in a specific field. SkolarGate is your way to go. Okay, so thank you very much, and I will see you maybe in the next lectures.